Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. In the vast expanse of the Andromeda Galaxy, humans had begun to settle on distant planets, forging alliances with alien species. Though war, betrayal, and galactic politics were common, the arrival of Earth's first medical ship to a remote star system was nothing less than a miracle. The crew, led by Dr. Nolan Quinn, was tasked with aiding the inhabitants of Gorgi, a planet on the brink of collapse after centuries of conflict and natural disasters. But they never expected to find themselves tangled in a story that would change the fate of an entire empire. Dr. Nolan Quinn had spent his career studying medicine in extreme conditions. As the chief medic aboard the Odysseus, a state-of-the-art human medical ship, he had seen everything from deadly alien viruses to severe battle injuries. However, nothing could have prepared him for his current mission. The Gorgathians were a proud and ancient species, and their king had called upon Earth's medical expertise when his daughter, Princess Nema, had been critically injured during a violent uprising in the capital city. As the ship hovered above the barren plains of Gorgi, Dr. Quinn checked his gear and prepared for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging day of his career. The Gorgathians had a reputation for their strength and resilience, but their healing methods were primitive by Earth's standards. They had already tried to save the princess, but their techniques had only worsened the situation. Now, they were looking to humans for the answer. The princess, known throughout the galaxy for her grace and beauty, was injured during a violent insurrection that had shaken the kingdom. Reports claimed she had been ambushed by a faction of rebels, her ship shot down as it attempted to flee the capital. Her injuries were critical: severe internal bleeding, multiple broken bones, and severe trauma to her spinal cord. The princess was barely alive when Dr. Quinn's team was summoned to her side. Upon landing, Dr. Quinn was escorted through the grand palace of King Zorith, an imposing figure whose height and strength matched his reputation as the ruler of the Gorgathian Empire. Despite the urgency of the situation, there was an air of reluctance as they passed through grand halls adorned with relics of 1,000 years of Gorgathian history. The walls whispered of ancient traditions, the weight of an empire's decline. Dr. Quinn wasn't concerned with the history. He had one mission: save the princess. Upon entering the medical wing, he was met with the cold stare of the Gorgathian royal physicians. They were a proud people, not accustomed to admitting that they needed external help. King Zorith stood at the edge of the operating table, his dark eyes fixed on his daughter, whose delicate features were contorted in pain. His arms were crossed, his jaw tight. Despite his stoic exterior, the king's eyes flickered with an emotion Dr. Quinn had not expected: desperation. Dr. Quinn nodded to the medical team. "I need a full scan now. She's in critical condition." The alien medics stepped back, seemingly confused at his request. They had their own way of treating injuries, relying on herbal concoctions and energy-based therapies. But Dr. Quinn knew the situation was beyond that. He gestured to his assistant, who brought over a portable diagnostic scanner. The device beeped, and a holographic display lit up, showing the extent of Princess Nema's injuries. Internal hemorrhaging, Dr. Quinn muttered under his breath. Multiple fractures. "We need to stabilize her or she won't make it through the night." He didn't look up as he worked, his fingers moving quickly as he applied the necessary treatments. The alien physicians watched in awe, having never seen such advanced techniques. Dr. Quinn used a mixture of advanced surgical technology and nanotech healing serums, carefully patching up the princess's internal injuries. As he worked, the royal family stood in silence, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and doubt. The princess's condition was critical, but she was showing signs of stabilization. Dr. Quinn didn't allow himself to relax. He knew this was only the first step. He carefully inserted nanobots into her bloodstream to repair damaged tissues at a microscopic level. These bots would work around the clock, rebuilding what had been broken, clearing away toxins, and regenerating cells faster than her body could on its own. It wasn't long before Princess Nema's breathing became steadier. Her complexion, once pale and ashen, regained a faint color. The medics exchanged glances, impressed by the efficiency of the human technology. "I think she's going to make it," Dr. Quinn said, wiping sweat from his brow. But we still need to monitor her closely. King Zorath moved closer, his towering presence casting a shadow over the medic. His voice, rough and deep, rumbled in the silence. You've saved her life, Earth Medic. For that, you have my gratitude. Dr. Quinn met the king's gaze. I didn't save her life alone. It's the technology and the team that did it. But I'm glad she's stable. Now we need to give her time to heal. Zorath nodded solemnly, but there was something else in his gaze. Something ancient, something older than the conflict that plagued his people. His eyes flickered to the still form of his daughter, a fleeting glimpse of pain crossing his features before he turned back to Dr. Quinn. You've done more than save my daughter, Earthling. You've done something no one else could do. And for that, I will grant you a gift. A gift that will alter your fate, and the fate of your people. The statement hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Dr. Quinn didn't know what to make of it. What kind of gift could a dying empire give him? Before he could ask, Zorath turned away, his voice cold as ice. Rest, medic. The princess will need your care when she wakes. You will soon learn what I mean. The tension in the room was palpable as the king exited, leaving Dr. Quinn standing over the recovering princess. His mind raced with the implications of the king's words. What had he meant by a gift? As the medics prepared to leave, Dr. Quinn remained at the princess's side, watching her slow but steady recovery. The Gorgathian king's offer was ominous, but for now, all Dr. Quinn cared about was that the princess had a chance to live. He only hoped that the gift Zorath spoke of would be one that would not bring unforeseen consequences. The story was just beginning, and Dr. Quinn had no idea that his fate, and the future of humanity, was about to be irrevocably changed. Days passed, and Princess Nima's condition continued to improve under Dr. Quinn's care. The princess, once on the brink of death, now showed signs of strength. Her breathing was steady, her pulse strong, and though she remained unconscious, her vitals indicated that the worst was over. Dr. Quinn kept a meticulous watch over her, coordinating with the Gorgathian medical staff, who seemed to grow more and more curious about the methods he used. The palace was silent except for the soft hum of medical equipment and the occasional murmur from the royal physicians. But despite the progress, Dr. Quinn couldn't shake the words the king had spoken. A gift that will alter your fate and the fate of your people. What did it mean? What kind of gift could the Gorgathian king offer him, and why did it feel so ominous? Dr. Quinn's mind raced, with possibilities, but he kept his focus on his patient. After all, the princess's survival was still far from guaranteed. The healing process had begun, but it would be a long road ahead. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the palace walls, a messenger arrived. His presence immediately felt by the way the guards stiffened and parted to make way for him. The messenger, a tall Gorgathian warrior, bowed before Dr. Quinn with a certain reverence that was unusual for the typically proud species. Dr. Quinn, the messenger spoke in a low, rumbling voice, "The king requests your presence." Dr. Quinn hesitated for a moment. He had expected a summons from King Zorath eventually, but he wasn't prepared for the gravity in the messenger's tone. He'd been working tirelessly to monitor the princess, and though he was eager to understand more about the king's cryptic promise, he wasn't sure he was ready for whatever awaited him in the king's chambers. "I'll come immediately," Dr. Quinn said, standing and wiping his hands on his medical coat. He gave the princess one last glance, ensuring she was stable, before following the messenger. The palace corridors were vast, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and foreign flowers. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings depicting scenes of Gorgathian history, battles, victories, and sacrifices. Yet, there was an eerie stillness to the halls now. The war that had raged for so long on Gorgith had taken its toll on the once vibrant empire. And now, the king's realm felt like a fading memory of glory. They arrived at the king's private chambers, a large, opulent room adorned with relics from ancient civilizations. The king himself stood by a large window, looking out over the barren landscapes that stretched endlessly beyond the palace. His broad shoulders were tense, his dark eyes brooding as he turned to face Dr. Quinn. "You've done what no one else could," Earth medic, Zorith said, his voice both deep and somber. My daughter's life has been spared, thanks to your intervention. The people of Gorgith owe you more than they realize. Dr. Quinn nodded, though he felt uncomfortable with the praise. It was his duty to heal, not to receive accolades. I just did my job, Your Majesty, but there's still much work to be done. She's not out of the woods yet. The king raised a hand, signaling for Dr. Quinn to stop. I understand, but that is not why I summoned you here. His voice lowered, becoming almost a whisper. You've saved my daughter, and in doing so, you have proven something to me. Something that I did not expect from your species. Dr. Quinn's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Zoritha's gaze shifted away from Dr. Quinn, his eyes focusing on the distant horizon. For years, the Gorgathian Empire has been crumbling. We have been torn apart by internal strife and external threats. Our people are powerful, yes, but we are not invincible. And we have nothing left. No allies, no hope. He turned back to Dr. Quinn, his eyes cold but full of something deeper. Desperation. Until now, Dr. Quinn felt the weight of the king's words settle over him like a cloud. The Gorgathian Empire, one of the oldest in the galaxy, was on the verge of collapse. The king was admitting, for the first time, that they had no one to rely on but themselves. You see, Earth, Zorith continued, has something that we do not. Something that I have come to understand in the days following my daughter's recovery. Your species, for all its faults, is capable of something rare. A resilience that we, the Gorgathians, have forgotten. And for that, I will offer you a gift. Dr. Quinn's pulse quickened. A gift? The king stepped forward, his gaze locking with Dr. Quinn's. I offer you the chance to become more than you are. To wield the power of the Gorgathian people. To carry with you the strength of our empire. Our legacy. Dr. Quinn felt a shiver run down his spine. He had known the Gorgathians were powerful, but this was something else entirely. The king was offering him power. Zorith extended his hand, revealing a strange artifact in his palm. It was a small, crystalline object, glowing with a faint internal light. This is the Gorgathian gem. It is an ancient relic, a conduit for the power of our ancestors. It has the ability to amplify the physical and mental strength of the one who possesses it. But be warned, Earth Medic, he said, his voice taking on a serious tone. It is not something to be taken lightly. It will change you, perhaps more than you expect. Dr. Quinn's mind raced. The implications of such a gift were far-reaching. With this power, he could potentially save not only the princess but countless others, heal entire populations, and even alter the course of the empire's decline. But what would it cost him? What did the king expect in return? I will accept it, Dr. Quinn said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. But only if you promise me that I can use it to help your people. Not for personal gain. King Zoritha's lips curled into a slight smile. You are wise, Earthling. That is exactly why I trust you. Take the gem and let it guide you. With that, Zorith placed the gem into Dr. Quinn's hand. The moment his fingers made contact with the crystal, a surge of energy coursed through him, warm, then cold, then blazing hot. He gasped, his body trembling as his mind seemed to expand, his senses sharpening beyond anything he had ever known. The power of the Gorgathian gem was now his to wield. The moment Dr. Quinn touched the Gorgathian gem, the world around him seemed to bend. Time itself appeared to stretch and warp. His mind exploded with visions, flashes of ancient battles, the rise and fall of empires, the crushing weight of centuries of struggle and survival. The power of the gem was more than he could have ever anticipated. He staggered back, his heart pounding as the energy coursed through his veins. His body was suddenly aware of every movement, every nerve, as though he could feel the hum of life itself within the walls of the palace. His senses were heightened to an unimaginable degree. Each sound, each breath, each shift in the atmosphere like a symphony playing inside his skull. The Gorgathian king observed silently, his stoic face giving nothing away, but Dr. Quinn could see the faintest flicker of approval in his eyes. The gem has accepted you, Zorith said, his voice measured and calm despite the storm of energy swirling around Dr. Quinn. "Now you must learn to control it. If you cannot, it will consume you." Dr. Quinn nodded, trying to steady his breath, but his hands trembled. He closed his eyes and focused, willing himself to regain control over the overwhelming surge of power. He reached deep within himself, feeling the energy thrumming like a wild pulse in his chest, and slowly, he found the rhythm. The gem's energy didn't overpower him as it had before. Instead, it felt like a wellspring that he could tap into, drawing from it a sense of clarity and strength. He opened his eyes again, meeting King Zoratha's gaze. "It's incredible. I feel as though I could—" He trailed off, realizing how dangerous that line of thinking could be. Zorath inclined his head, his dark eyes studying Dr. Quinn with a level of intensity that felt almost predatory. "You could conquer entire worlds, Earthling. But that is not your task. No, your task is far more delicate. You now carry the burden of the Gorgathian legacy. You will either restore us or destroy us." The weight of the king's words settled heavily on Dr. Quinn. He had expected to help heal the princess, perhaps assist in restoring the Gorgathian people to their former glory. But now, with the power of the gem, the stakes had escalated to something far greater than he could have imagined. Zorath continued, his tone softer now, but still resolute. "The gem is not just a tool for power. It is a test. It will push you beyond your limits. It will show you the true potential of your species. And it will also show you the cost of wielding such power." Dr. Quinn, still adjusting to the newfound strength flowing through his body, gave a small, tight nod. He knew this was no longer just about saving the princess. It was about the survival of an entire empire, and perhaps the future of humanity itself. As he stood there, contemplating the king's words, a strange thought crept into his mind. What if this power wasn't just meant to restore the Gorgathian people? What if it was meant to allow humanity to surpass them? The thought was fleeting, but it was enough to make him pause. The gem could very well offer Earth the chance to become the dominant species in the galaxy. But would that be what humanity wanted? Or was there another path, one that did not involve subjugating others, but instead truly helping those who were in need? Before he could ponder the implications of those thoughts any further, Zorath spoke again. "There is one more thing you must understand, Dr. Quinn. The gem connects to the very essence of the Gorgathian people. It holds the memories of our ancestors, their wisdom, their pain, and their strength. As its new bearer, you will have access to these memories. You will experience everything they did, their greatest triumphs and their most devastating losses." Dr. Quinn's mind raced. The idea of gaining the wisdom of an entire civilization was tempting, but the cost, he wasn't sure if he was ready for that. The power to change the course of history came with a price, and he could already feel the weight of it pressing down on him. "What do you mean?" Dr. Quinn asked, his voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty within him. "The gem can open the gateways to the collective memories of the Gorgathians," Zorath explained. "You will see what they saw, feel what they felt. It will help you understand our people, and in turn, help you decide our fate. But be warned, once the memories begin to flood in, it may be difficult to distinguish them from your own. The gem can drive its bearer mad if they cannot control it." Dr. Quinn swallowed hard. He had spent years studying the human mind, but the idea of experiencing the memories of an entire species was something far beyond any medical textbook or research. He had no idea what he was about to undertake, but he had no choice now. He had already committed himself to this path. With a deep breath, Dr. Quinn took the first step toward embracing the power of the gem. He closed his eyes and concentrated, allowing himself to connect with the artifact. Almost immediately, he felt a wave of energy wash over him, a surge of ancient memories, both beautiful and tragic. He saw the rise of the Gorgathian Empire, its grand cities flourishing under the guidance of wise rulers. He felt the joy of a united people, their strength and pride as they spread across the stars. But then, the images shifted. He saw the wars, the betrayals, the bitter losses that had led the empire to the brink of collapse. He felt the pain of a people who had once known nothing but power, now reduced to survivors clinging to what little they had left. The emotions overwhelmed him. He felt the weight of centuries of conflict, the anguish of kings and queens who had fought to preserve their empire, only to see it crumble in the end. It was as though his own soul was being torn apart by the intensity of the memories. And then, as quickly as it had started, the flood of memories subsided. Dr. Quinn opened his eyes, his breath shallow, his body drenched in sweat. He staggered back, feeling as though the very foundation of his being had been shaken to its core. Zorith watched him intently, but there was no pity in his gaze, only a quiet understanding. You've seen what we were. Now you must decide what we will become. And you must be ready for the consequences, Earth Medic. The power of the gem will not be easily controlled. And once it is fully unlocked, there is no turning back. Dr. Quinn nodded, his mind reeling from the overwhelming experience. He had seen the Gorgathian Empire at its height and at its darkest. And now, with the gem in his possession, he had the power to either restore the empire to its former glory or let it fall into oblivion. But he wasn't sure if the Gorgathian people were ready to change, or if they even could. The fate of an empire, and possibly the future of humanity, now rested in his hands. But would he be strong enough to wield the gem's power without losing himself in the process? That, Dr. Quinn knew, was the true test. The days following the awakening of the Gorgathian gem were both a blur and a slow-motion unraveling for Dr. Quinn. The intensity of the memories he had experienced left him physically and mentally drained. He found himself pacing the halls of the royal palace at night, unable to sleep, as the weight of what he had learned pressed down on him. Each step he took seemed to reverberate with the gravity of the choice before him. Princess Nima's recovery had progressed steadily, though she remained unconscious for longer periods than Dr. Quinn had hoped. She was stable now, her pulse strong and her breathing even, but the princess was still trapped in the limbo between life and death, her body slowly healing but her mind struggling to awaken. Dr. Quinn spent his days in her chamber, applying treatments and keeping her stable, while his nights were consumed with thoughts of the gem, the power it offered, and the burden it placed upon him. One evening, as he stood at the edge of the palace courtyard, staring into the endless stretch of Gorgatha's barren wilderness, King Zorith approached. The air was thick with tension, the same weight that had settled upon Dr. Quinn the moment he first touched the gem. "You've been quiet, Earth Medic," Zoritha's voice cut through the silence, deep and contemplative. "I see it in your eyes, the burden of the power you now carry." Dr. Quinn didn't turn to face the king. Instead, he let the cool wind wash over him, trying to clear his thoughts. "I didn't expect this responsibility. I didn't ask for it, but now I'm bound to it, to the fate of your people." Zorith stepped beside him, his heavy footsteps a reminder of the vast difference between them. "No, you did not ask for this, but you are the one who has the gem now, and you are the one who must make the choice." The words hit Dr. Quinn like a hammer. He had heard them before, but now they seemed to have more weight. A choice. What kind of choice could he possibly make that would change the future of an entire empire? "I've seen the memories," Dr. Quinn said, his voice tinged with the frustration he had been holding in. "I know what your people went through, the rise, the fall, the wars. But what you don't understand is that I didn't just see your history. I saw everything. The pride, the greed, the endless cycle of violence and destruction that you can never seem to escape. And now you want me to fix that." The king remained silent, allowing Dr. Quinn to speak his mind. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human medic, understanding the conflict that raged within him. "The past is a heavy chain, Earth Medic. It is easy to point to the mistakes of those who came before us. But it is not the past that needs fixing. It is the future. And that is why I brought you here." Dr. Quinn turned to face the king, a fire rising in his chest. "The future? What future is there for your people? You're on the verge of extinction. The gem, its power, yes, but it's also a curse. What if I can't control it? What if it drives me to become like every other ruler who thought they could conquer the stars, only to fall into corruption?" King Zoritha's expression softened for a brief moment, an almost imperceptible flicker of something that might have been empathy. The gem's power is not for conquest, Earthling. It is not a tool for domination. It is a test of will, of spirit. What you must understand is that the Gorgathian people do not need another conqueror. They need a leader who will break the cycle. The gem will show you the way, but it will also show you your own darkness. Dr. Quinn felt his breath catch. The king was right. The more he considered it, the more he realized that this power was not simply about fixing the Gorgathian Empire. It was about confronting the darkness within himself. The temptation to wield such power, to become a godlike figure capable of reshaping the galaxy. It was intoxicating. But it was also dangerous. I don't know if I can do this, Dr. Quinn admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can be the one to change this empire. You've seen how we are, Zorth. Humans aren't perfect either. We have our flaws. And if this gem is meant to make me a leader, I'm not sure I'm the right one. Zorth nodded solemnly, his gaze distant. I know what you are capable of, Earth Medic. And I have watched your people for long enough to see that you are not so different from us. You are as capable of greatness as you are of destruction. But I believe in you. Dr. Quinn's heart clenched at those words. He had never imagined the king, this powerful, proud ruler of a dying empire, would ever place such faith in him. But there was something else in Zorth's voice now. Something raw, something that hinted at a desperation he hadn't seen before. The choice is not just yours, Zorth continued. It is the choice of your people, too. The gem will reveal your destiny, but you must decide whether to walk that path. Do you fight for your own survival, or do you help us, the Gorgathians, rebuild what we have lost? Before Dr. Quinn could respond, a sudden, urgent message flashed across his wrist communicator. His heart sank as he read the alert. Princess Nema, he murmured, panic rising in his chest. Something's happened. Zorth's demeanor shifted instantly, his eyes hardening. What is it? Her condition has worsened, Dr. Quinn replied quickly, his mind already racing. The healing process isn't progressing as it should. I need to get to her now. Without another word, they both moved swiftly through the palace, racing to the medical wing. Dr. Quinn's thoughts were clouded with worry, but also with the weight of the decision that was now thrust upon him. The gem, the power, it had to mean something. He had to use it. If he couldn't even save Nema, how could he hope to save an empire? When they arrived at the princess's chamber, the sight that greeted them was not what Dr. Quinn had expected. Nema's body was surrounded by a glowing, pulsing light. Something strange, something alien. The gem's power, perhaps? But the more Dr. Quinn studied the energy surrounding her, the more he realized that it wasn't just the gem. It was something far more complicated, something darker. The choice had come, and with it, a new challenge that would test everything he had come to understand about power, destiny, and the survival of the Gorgathian people. The chamber was filled with a soft, pulsating glow as Princess Nema lay motionless on the bed. Dr. Quinn rushed to her side, his pulse quickening as his eyes scanned the delicate equipment monitoring her condition. The energy surrounding her seemed almost alive. It was not the serene, healing glow he had expected from the gem, but something more chaotic, more violent. Nema, Dr. Quinn whispered, reaching out to gently grasp her hand. The temperature of her skin was colder than it had ever been before. Her once steady breathing was shallow, uneven. The soothing hum of the machines had now taken on a frantic rhythm, alerting him that something was gravely wrong. Zorth, standing just behind him, surveyed the scene with increasing concern. His face, usually a mask of control, was now marked with uncertainty and fear. What is happening to her, Earth Medic? The king demanded, his voice tight. I don't know, Dr. Quinn admitted, his mind racing. It doesn't make sense. She was improving. This isn't just a setback. Suddenly, the energy around the princess intensified, filling the room with a low, ominous hum. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. The temperature in the room dropped dramatically, and Dr. Quinn could feel a sharp, uncomfortable chill settle in his bones. The princess's eyes snapped open. Dr. Quinn staggered back as her gaze locked onto his empty, yet somehow filled with an unnatural intensity. Her pupils were black, and a strange, alien light seemed to radiate from deep within them. "Nema?" Dr. Quinn called, but his voice faltered as he felt the pulse of energy growing stronger. The princess's body began to twitch, her fingers curling into claws, her breath erratic and unnatural. It wasn't the same Nema he had worked so hard to save. Zorith stepped forward, his face hardening. "No, this is not my daughter." Dr. Quinn's mind raced, realizing that the gem's power had done something far beyond what he had anticipated. It had affected Nema. But how? Was it possible that the gem's influence wasn't just limited to him? Was it capable of reaching out, altering the very essence of those around him? He looked to Zorith for answers, but the king's face was twisted with both rage and sorrow. "This is what the gem can do," Zorith said, voice low and strained. "It taps into the very soul of its bearer and everyone it touches. The memories it carries. They can infect the mind. And it has infected Nema. She is no longer the same." The princess's body jerked violently, her limbs convulsing as if her very muscles were being stretched beyond their limits. Dr. Quinn felt a cold dread settle in his chest. He had to act quickly. But how? He knew that if he didn't stabilize her soon, Nema might be lost completely, consumed by the power that had been awakened inside her. Zorith watched helplessly as his daughter's condition worsened. "The gem is a weapon, not a gift," he muttered bitterly, regret lacing his voice. "It was meant to be a beacon of our people's strength. But it is far more dangerous than I ever understood." Dr. Quinn's mind snapped back into focus. "What do we do?" he asked urgently, scanning the princess's condition. "There's nothing we can do unless we can sever the connection between her and the gem," Zorith said, a cold determination settling in his words. "The gem draws its power from the memories of my ancestors, from the very core of Gorgathian civilization. If it has begun to corrupt her, there is no easy way to reverse it. She is becoming a conduit for something ancient, something beyond our control." Dr. Quinn's heart sank. The implications were dire. If Nema was becoming an avatar for the gem's power, there was no telling what might happen to her mind or body. She could very well be lost forever. Desperation flooded Dr. Quinn's thoughts. He had come to Gorgith to save lives, not to destroy them. Yet, he had been handed the key to the Gorgathian Empire's future, and now it seemed like that very key was poisoning everything it touched. "I can't let this happen," Dr. Quinn said, his voice firm, even as he watched the princess's form writhe in unnatural agony. "There has to be a way to stop it." Zorith stood motionless, his eyes dark with the weight of centuries of loss. "The gem cannot be controlled by any one person, Earth Medic. It only amplifies what is already inside. What we fail to understand is that it is not just a source of power. It is a reflection of our deepest desires, our darkest fears." Dr. Quinn looked down at his hands, his fingers twitching with the power that still hummed within him. The energy of the gem was embedded deep within his being. It was a part of him now, and with it came the overwhelming temptation to use that power to fix everything. But at what cost? Could he really save Nema? Could he save Gorgith? A sudden thought struck him. What if Nema wasn't the only one affected by the gem? What if it was slowly turning everyone it touched into something different? The idea was terrifying, and the implications were even worse. If the gem could twist Nema's soul so quickly, what would happen if it spread beyond her? What if the entire Gorgathian population, already weakened by war and internal strife, fell under its influence? Dr. Quinn's heart raced as he turned back to Nema, her body still writhing in spasms. "We need to sever her connection to the gem," he said decisively, his mind now clear with purpose. "We have to remove the gem's influence. If we don't, Gorgith will fall again." Zorith's expression darkened. "How?" "The gem's power is unlike anything we have ever faced. No one has ever been able to control it once it has taken root." Dr. Quinn's eyes locked onto Zorith's. "We need to get to the heart of the gem's power. If I can connect with it, maybe I can control it long enough to sever the link." I may be able to reverse the damage. Zorith hesitated. You risk everything by doing that. The gem will not allow itself to be controlled so easily. But Dr. Quinn was already moving, his mind made up. The choice was clear. He could let the gem consume Nema, and with her, the last hope of Gorgith. Or he could take the risk, tap into the gem's power himself, and face whatever consequences awaited. No more waiting, Dr. Quinn said. I won't let her die. Without waiting for Zorith's response, he placed his hands on the gem that rested at Nema's side, feeling its energy thrumming beneath his skin. As he closed his eyes, he felt the connection form. A bond stronger than anything he had ever experienced. He could feel the gem's ancient consciousness stirring, its power threatening to overwhelm him. As Dr. Quinn placed his hands on the gem, an explosion of energy coursed through him, sending a shockwave of raw power pulsing through his veins. He gasped as his mind expanded, becoming aware of 1,000 different things at once. He could feel the gem's consciousness, ancient, vast, and insidious. It was as if he were standing at the very core of an entire civilization, one that had been lost to time, yet still lived on in this powerful artifact. The raw energy was almost suffocating. The memories of the Gorgathian ancestors surged through him again. Triumphs, betrayals, wars fought across countless worlds, victories that felt hollow, and losses that stretched for eternity. It was overwhelming, like being pulled into an abyss where time no longer existed. The emotions, the raw pain and desire of an entire species, slammed against him, threatening to crush him under their weight. But it wasn't just the gem's history he was sensing. It was Nema. Her presence flickered like a flame, caught in the storm of power that surrounded them. Her mind, once filled with the simple thoughts of a young woman, now thrashed in confusion. The gem was feeding off her, changing her, twisting her into something unrecognizable. Dr. Quinn fought to maintain his focus. He couldn't let the gem consume him. He couldn't let it take Nema. He had to sever the connection. With every ounce of his willpower, he reached deeper, pulling on the threads of the gem's power that were entwined with Nema's soul. The more he concentrated, the more he could feel the darkness that had gripped her, the malignant force that had taken root inside her mind. The gem was using her as a vessel, an empty shell in which it could manifest its power. And then, something unexpected happened. As Dr. Quinn reached deeper into the gem's core, he felt a shift, a subtle but unmistakable change. The energy surrounding Nema flared, and for a moment, it seemed as if the gem's grip loosened. He could feel Nema's presence more clearly now, not just as a victim, but as someone fighting back. She was still in there, still alive. But she was being drowned in the gem's influence, her mind pushed to the brink. Nema! Dr. Quinn shouted, his voice breaking through the chaos. Fight it! You can fight this! For a moment, nothing happened. The chaos within her remained. But then, a faint flicker of light sparked behind her eyes. Her body, still twitching violently, stilled for a heartbeat. Her breath steadied, just slightly, as if she were hearing his voice from far away. Dr. Quinn's heart raced. He could feel her will, her strength. She wasn't lost completely. He had to reach her, guide her through the storm the gem had created. You are not alone, Nema, Dr. Quinn murmured, leaning closer. You don't have to do this. I'm here. Fight the darkness. He felt the gem's response almost immediately, a sharp, angry surge of energy pushing against him, trying to throw him off balance. The gem did not want to let go. It wanted control, and it would fight him every step of the way. But Dr. Quinn held firm, focusing all his energy on Nema. Stay with me, he whispered, his voice desperate. You have the strength to fight it. Nema's chest rose and fell, her breathing now more controlled, more grounded. Dr. Quinn could feel her. Stronger now, her presence growing more defined. He wasn't just connecting with the gem. He was connecting with her. She was pushing back, finding her way through the fog of power the gem had laid over her. And then, with a final surge of strength, Nema's body jerked upward, her eyes snapping wide open. This time, they were not the black, alien pupils he had seen before. They were her eyes, bright, determined, and clear. The light in the room grew brighter, the strange, unnatural hum of energy shifting, calming. The chaos that had filled the air for so long began to recede. Nima was no longer thrashing. She was still, alive. Dr. Quinn let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He pulled his hands away from the gem, his body trembling with exhaustion from the immense strain of the psychic battle. His head felt heavy, his mind foggy, but he knew the worst was over. Zorith, who had been standing in the shadows, watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "You've done it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved her." Dr. Quinn barely had the strength to respond. His mind was still reeling from the intensity of the connection with the gem, but he managed to focus on Nima, who was now sitting up, her eyes slowly adjusting to the world around her. Her gaze flicked to Dr. Quinn, confusion lingering in her expression. What happened?" Nima's voice was hoarse, as if she had been submerged in water for too long. Dr. Quinn smiled weakly. "You're safe now, Nima. You were connected to the gem, but I broke that connection. You're free." Nima blinked, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of his words. "The gem? What do you mean? What happened to me?" "You were possessed by it," Dr. Quinn explained, his voice still shaky. "It was using you. The power of the gem tried to consume you, but you fought it. You're stronger than it ever thought." Nima looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers as if testing the sensation of her own body. Slowly, her expression softened, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. I remember feeling it. The gem. It was inside me. But it was so much, so overwhelming." She looked up at Dr. Quinn, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you. You saved me." Dr. Quinn nodded, but he was too drained to say anything more. His mind was still reeling from the flood of memories, emotions, and power. The gem was a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. He had seen its potential to destroy, to corrupt, but he had also seen its potential to heal, to restore. And now, he was left with a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Had he truly saved Nima, or had he just delayed the inevitable? The gem was still in play, still in his possession, and he knew that its power could never be fully controlled. Not by him, not by anyone. Zorith approached slowly, his eyes scanning his daughter with a mix of relief and sadness. "She is still alive, and for that I am grateful," he said quietly. "But we are not free of the gem's influence. The power it holds is too great. You have only temporarily severed its hold on her." Dr. Quinn nodded, understanding the gravity of Zoritha's words. "I know. The gem can't be ignored. But right now we've bought Nima some time. And maybe there's a way to use its power without losing ourselves." Zoritha's expression hardened. "Perhaps, but it will take more than time. It will take a sacrifice. You are not the only one who has touched the gem, Dr. Quinn. And I fear there are consequences that none of us can foresee." As he looked down at Nima, still recovering, Dr. Quinn felt the weight of Zoritha's words settle heavily in his chest. There was no turning back. The gem's power had already begun to change the course of their lives, and it would not release them so easily. The room fell silent as Dr. Quinn's thoughts raced. The weight of Zoritha's words hung heavily in the air, suffocating in its implications. The gem had not only changed Nima, it had changed him. It had altered the very fabric of his being. He could feel its presence deep inside him, pulsing and thrumming like a second heartbeat. He wasn't sure what was worse, the terrifying power it offered or the fact that he had already become so dependent on it. Nima, still seated on the bed, slowly turned her gaze to her father. "Father, what is he talking about? What happens now?" Zoritha's face softened for a brief moment as he looked at his daughter, but there was an unmistakable shadow in his eyes. "You were not just a victim, my daughter. You were the vessel. The gem chose you, and it chose him as well." Dr. Quinn frowned, confused. "What do you mean? I wasn't chosen. I only tried to save her. You have no idea what you have become." Zorith said grimly. The gem, when it bonds with its bearer, changes them. It becomes a part of them, deep inside, binding them to its power. You, Earth Medic, are now bound to the same fate that has plagued the Gorgathians for centuries. Dr. Quinn's breath caught in his throat. His mind reeled. The gem had chosen him? Had it manipulated him from the beginning? It had always felt like an infection, a force he couldn't ignore. He had always believed it was just a tool he had to control, but now it felt like the gem was controlling him. Every passing day, the influence had grown stronger. Your people, Dr. Quinn said, his voice strained. You've lived with this power for generations. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? Zoritha's expression hardened. We thought we could control it. We believed that we could use it to rebuild our empire, to restore Gorgith to its former glory. But we were wrong. The gem doesn't restore. It destroys. And now it has found a new host. You? Nima's eyes widened in realization. Wait, you're saying he's infected too? Her voice trembled as she looked at Dr. Quinn, unsure whether to trust him or fear him. Dr. Quinn felt a pang of guilt, but it was drowned by the power that throbbed within him. I didn't ask for this, he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. But I can feel it, the pull, the temptation. And I'm scared. I don't know how to stop it. For a long moment, Zorith said nothing. He stood at the foot of Nima's bed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, his posture rigid and unyielding. Finally, he spoke. The gem's power is not just physical. It is spiritual. It taps into the very essence of the beings it touches, drawing from their deepest desires and fears. It magnifies everything, both the light and the dark. We, the Gorgathians, have lived with it for centuries. It has destroyed us from within. Dr. Quinn turned to look at Nima, his heart heavy with the weight of the situation. I won't let it destroy me, he said, more to himself than anyone else. I won't let it destroy you either. Zorith met his gaze, his eyes sharp with the intensity of a ruler who had seen everything and trusted nothing. You think you can control it? You are a human. You are not meant to bear the burden of the gem's power. It will consume you, just as it consumed us. Nima, still sitting on the bed, looked between her father and Dr. Quinn, her brow furrowed in confusion and concern. Father, is there no hope? Is there no way to rid ourselves of it? Zorith sighed, his voice heavy. There is a way, but it is not one I wish for any of us to consider. Dr. Quinn's mind spun. What do you mean? If there's a way, we need to know. Zoritha's expression softened with regret, but his words were still cold. The only way to rid the gem's influence from your soul is to sever the bond completely, to destroy the gem. But it is no simple task. Doing so would require one of us to sacrifice ourselves completely. The gem will not let go easily. It will resist, and it will destroy anyone who tries to sever its grip. Dr. Quinn's heart sank. The thought of destroying the gem, of severing the connection, was terrifying. But it was also the only way to truly be free. Yet, the cost of doing so was clear. One life, one person would have to give up everything to destroy the gem. He turned to Nima, whose expression had grown pale as the full weight of Zoritha's words sank in. She was silent, her eyes distant, as if she were grappling with the enormity of the decision before her. I won't let anyone sacrifice themselves for this, Dr. Quinn said firmly. I will find a way to break free of this. There has to be another way. Zorith shook his head. You don't understand. The gem will not be broken. It is part of our history, our bloodline. Cannot be stopped by force. The only way to rid yourself of its grip is through an ultimate sacrifice. Dr. Quinn clenched his fists, frustration building. I'm not going to give up. I didn't come here to fail. I came here to save lives. Then you will fail, Zorith responded coldly. The gem is not something you can just fight. It is something that will use you until there is nothing left. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Nima was the first to break it. I won't let anyone die for this, she said softly, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. She stood slowly, her legs still weak but determined. There's another way. I can feel it. Dr. Quinn turned to her, surprised by the calmness in her voice. What are you saying, Nima? She met his gaze, her eyes fierce. If the gem feeds off our deepest fears and desires, then maybe we can use that to our advantage. Maybe we can choose what it sees. Instead of giving in to its power, we force it to see something else. Something stronger. Dr. Quinn's eyes widened with realization. You're saying we can turn the gem's power against itself? Nima nodded slowly. If we focus on what we truly value, on love, on the bond between us, we can overwhelm it. We can replace the darkness it seeks to feed on with something greater. Zorith stared at his daughter, incredulous. You would risk everything on an unproven theory? I have no choice, Nima said. None of us do. The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time, Zorith looked uncertain. He turned to Dr. Quinn. You heard her. You've seen the gem's power. If this is a path you wish to take, I will not stop you. Dr. Quinn stared at Nima, the weight of her words settling in his chest. She was right. This was the only choice left. Together, they would face the gem's power, not with fear, but with everything they had to offer. Their love, their humanity. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stellar HFY content. Ring that bell to stay updated, and we'll see you next time.